Hello and welcome to episode 26 of the PI Filmmaker podcast. Now, as you'll be able to hear from the audio, I'm currently outside recording on a lapel mic, and the reason I'm outside is because this evening I'm going to a Q&A at the BFI in London. So I'm actually on the Southbank as I speak, and for those of you who've seen X, my first feature film, I'm right near the location where Terry and Andrea have a conversation on a bench. And in that scene, there's a statue that's glimpsed behind them. And I'm right near that statue. So for those of you who know the film, that's where I am. And it's pretty loud because it's the middle of summer. So I actually started recording and I had to stop it because there was so much banging of people dragging in pallets into the National Theatre, which I'm right beside. But I paused it because I was distracted, but this time, no matter what happens, I'm going to continue. I'm currently on the Southbank, and I'm right by where I shot a scene, and unbelievably, that's now 8 years ago. So that was 8 summers ago, which is hard to believe. We were shooting guerrilla fashion on the Southbank, shot pretty much a whole morning. And it's kind of funny being on the Southbank. I said why I'm here, aren't I? I'm going to a Q&A. Yeah, sorry, I've got my notes as usual, but I'm getting distracted. I'm just people watching as I speak. So this evening I'm going to this Q&A. And, we've got loud people. Yeah, so at the BFI this evening, there's a screening of Persona, the Ingmar Bergman film. And it's going to be on 35mm. And the reason I've headed all the way to London to see this is because there's going to be afterwards a Q&A with Cate Blanchett, Nina Hoss, and writer-director Benedict Andrews. Now, you might be thinking, why are they doing a Q&A for a film that's from the 1960s by Ingmar Bergman? Those three are doing a new play, which Benedict Andrews is writing and directing. And it's a mashup of Sophocles and Ingmar Bergman's work. So it's called Electra Persona. And that's pretty much all I know at the minute. So I've got some notes up online. So it says, where are we? So the description of the play is, about the show, which role undid you in the end? Electra, a daughter consumed by grief and rage, clinging to the idea of justice as a world comes apart. Persona, during a performance of Electra, an actress suddenly falls silent. What follows is a rupture. 2 women drawn into an intense, unsettling encounter where speech breaks down and the boundaries between self and role give way. Featuring Cate Blanchett, Nina Hoss, and Ella Lily Highland, Benedict Andrews' thrilling production fuses ancient myth and modern psychology in a powerful exploration of identity and the fragile line between who we are and who we play. So because I booked tickets for that play, me and Miranda are coming October, I managed to get priority booking. The BFI sent out, or the National Theatre, I don't know which one, sent out a link for people who'd booked tickets to see the theatre production, that they could get priority booking for this screening of Persona, the film, with a Q&A by Blanchett, Hoss and Benedict Andrews. So obviously I jumped at the chance, I booked a ticket, and as a result I'm now on the Southbank. And so obviously I do apologise if it's bangy and loud and there's people making loads of noise, but what can I do? I'm on the Southbank. But I'm under those lovely trees, if you know the Southbank, and I'm right near the concrete jungle that is the National Theatre. And obviously, as I'm here, I'm going to record the Q&A with those three, and I'll put it at the end of this podcast episode. But before that, I just thought I'd talk a little bit about seeing Cate Blanchett on stage, and also some of these ideas around criticism again, because I went to, whilst I was on the tube, I was having a read of the Letterboxd reviews of Persona, and then I had a read of Roger Ebert's reviews, and I say reviews because he did more than one of Persona, and I'm going to read them out. But first of all, I was just going to speak about, first of all, 35mm. Isn't it strange that now the idea of watching a film on film is like a premium format? You know, when we think about things like the Odyssey, it's now a premium format. that sold to us as something special. When I was a kid, that was the only way to see a film on film. I remember when the Odeon was saying, "Oh, watch Star Wars: Attack of the Clones on digital." They've got digital projectors for Attack of the Clones in 2002. So most of my childhood, I was watching films on film. But now they took that away from us, and now they're selling it back to us as a premium. It's kind of like what Netflix have done with television. They've sold us adverts again. It's just interesting. And obviously, speaking of film, I did go and watch the Odyssey again on 70mm at the IMAX, round 2. And some of those thoughts I had around the abrupt editing, I was able to see specific moments where I could identify where the issues were specifically. So what I'm going to do actually is once the Blu-ray is available, I think I'm going to do another video essay in which I highlight some of those moments, because it does prevent some of those abrupt cuts. Don't work for me. It'd be like if every single song on Abbey Road used the abrupt cut of "I Want You, She's So Heavy." If you do it once, it works. If you keep being abrupt in your editing, it just causes chaos, and you can't emotionally invest. I can't anyway. So I saw one scene where a Trojan soldier, and I wrote a Letterboxd review, so if any of you follow me on Letterboxd, go and have a look, because I identified some of these issues around the editing. But a Trojan soldier, and did I say a Trojan horse? A Trojan soldier, when the Greeks are coming through the gates, a Trojan soldier fires an arrow. Now, our familiarity with editing would suggest that, okay, the next shot is going to show us what became of the arrow. Did a soldier get hit? Did another soldier duck? Did it hit their shield? No, we see this arrow fired, and the next shot has nothing to do with the arrow that's fired. So it's like, well, why show us the arrow being fired in the first place? And it's almost like Nolan tries to overwhelm with like shots, cuts, music, sound. But watch it more than once, and some of these issues become more apparent. That's not to say I don't think it's a good film, like I enjoyed it, but I certainly don't think it's Nolan's masterpiece. There's another moment, they're heading towards the whirlpool, Odysseus' ship, and all chaos ensues, and there's a cut to Odysseus, Matt Damon, for like a second. And it's so short that you don't know what he's looking at, why he's looking at it. There's no hint as to what his state of mind is in regards to whether they're going to go into the whirlpool or through the rocks. It's just there and then it's gone. So it's like, well, why show us? Why show something that has no meaning beyond the shot itself? It's just a shot with no narrative consequence. So anyway, so there's some issues around the Odyssey and what I was trying to grapple with last week in regards to some of the editing choices. Whoa, very windy. Can you hear that? The trees. So I'm very excited for this Q&A this evening with Cate Blanchett. I've seen Cate Blanchett on stage a few times now. The first time I saw her was in New York on Broadway. Like, oh, get me, bragging. I saw her in a play called The Present, which I'm pretty sure was Chekhov. Now, you just have to take my word on that. I think it was an adaptation of a Chekhov play that had been updated. So I saw that in New York around about 10 years ago. That was the first time I saw her on stage. And then Miranda and I saw Cate Blanchett on stage at the National Theatre around about 2018. What was it called? I've got the note here. It was something about destroying each other. Oh, here we go. The new play is called, this is an article from 2018, When We Have Sufficiently Tortured Each Other, 12 Variations on Samuel Richardson's Pamela. Yeah, that wasn't great, to be honest. And then most recently, I saw Cate Blanchett, me and Miranda saw her at the Barbican in the Seagull and Tom Burke was in it as well, and I can't remember the actor's name. They play the villain in Deadpool Wolverine. I think it might have been Charles Xavier's sister, but I don't remember. Yeah, they were in it, and so we saw that at the Barbican, and that was incredible. That genuinely was. probably the best acting I've ever seen, whether that be film, but 100% on stage. It was unbelievable, and we were right at the front, Miranda and I, a few yards from Cate Blanchett. At one moment, she was cuddling her son on the stage. Oh, and the son was played by Cody, is it McPhee Smith? I think that's their name. I forget. And they were in an X-Men film, actually. They were in, I think they played Nightcrawler in one of the films. Anyway, so we saw Cate Blanchett cuddling her son on stage, and this was like a couple of feet away. And honestly, I realised after the scene had ended, my mouth was open. I was absolutely flabbergasted. It was like watching someone break down right in front of you. Not in that theatrical way that it's clearly someone acting. It was so real. Unbelievable. So people say I'm negative, but actually if something's really impressive, I'm the first person to say that's incredible. So Cate Blanchett, when I saw her at the Barbican, absolutely incredible. So now some thoughts on Persona. So, Letterboxd. So while I was on the tube, I had a look at the top Letterboxd reviews, and following on from what I was saying last week about Letterboxd destroying film criticism. So the top one that comes up for me, and I'm guessing this is the case for everyone who has a Letterboxd account, but my algorithm shows someone's giving it 5 stars, someone called Sam, and they say, "Me with my toon brain cells, haha, they're lesbians." So apparently that's a review, and it's the most popular one for Persona.
Oh, you're not going? Well, then can we go to the next?
We've got someone loud walking past. The next person, number one Gizmo fan, says, "This movie is so soft and rough and perfect, but I have no idea what the actual fuck happened." 5 stars. Then we've got Amaya, 4 stars. "So this is how men feel after watching Fight Club." Incredible. Next we've got Lauren, 4.5 stars, who says, "I mean, who doesn't sit someone you barely know down and tell them your deepest, darkest hoe stories?" And then Muriel says, 5 stars, "What if we self-isolated at a house by the sea and started to lose our minds? And we are both girls." Fucking hell. Right, so when we talk about something being lost with Letterboxd, I'm now going to read Roger Ebert's 1967 review of Persona. So I'm guessing this is when he worked at the Chicago, what's the newspaper called? I forget. But this is his November 7th, 1967 review, and he gave it 4 stars, and he only works on 4 stars. He doesn't have 5 stars. I don't know why, but that's the case. So he says, "At first, the screen is black. Then, very slowly, an area of dark grey transforms itself into blinding white. This is light projected through film onto the screen, the first basic principle of the movies. The light flickers and jumps around, finally resolving itself into a crude cartoon of a fat lady. Then the pace picks up. There are shots of cops in old cars, maybe the Keystone Cops. There's a flicker of a tramp, maybe it was Chaplin. There is some footage from an old horror movie, and now there is a soundtrack too. We hear creepy music, then some other shots, harder to place. All this takes several minutes before the titles for Ingmar Bergman's Persona finally appear on the screen. Apparently Bergman intends his film to begin with the invention of the moving picture, and then to work its way forward in time to the present moment. He is establishing Persona as the definitive episode in the history of the movies. Most movies try to seduce us into forgetting we're only watching a movie, but Bergman keeps reminding us his story isn't real. At a crucial moment in his plot, the film seemingly breaks, and after it rips for a few dozen frames, it seems to catch fire within the projector. We see it melting on the screen, then blackness, then light, and then the old silent comedies again, as Persona starts again at the beginning. Near the end of the film, there is even a transition made by cutting from one of the actresses to a shot of the camera crew, lightmen, camera operators, script girls, and Bergman himself looking at us dispassionately. Then the on-screen camera turns, and in its viewfinder we see what will be the next scene. We've been brutally reminded that the story is being filtered through technical equipment. Bergman's preoccupation with the illusion and reality seems to be tied into the plot of Persona, which involves a neurotic actress, Liv Ullmann, and her nurse, Bibi Andersson. The actress stopped speaking one night in the middle of a performance and hasn't said a word since. The nurse's duty is to try and win her confidence during a summer of seclusion in the country. As the two women grow intimate, a strange exchange of personalities seems to occur. "No, I'm not you," the nurse cries. "I'm myself." The actress doesn't reply to this or anything else, and the nurse is driven to desperate means in an attempt to get through to her. Who is she? Who is anybody? What is real? This is a difficult, frustrating film, seeming at times to have more in common with the personal cinema of Jean-Luc Godard than with Bergman's usual cool control. The director keeps reminding us that he's right there, creating his film before our eyes, and the distance between his presence and the story he tells is like the distance between what the actress is and what she reveals. The nurse is maddened by the unspeaking actress in the same sense that the audience is frustrated by the movie. Both stubbornly refuse to be conventional and to respond as we expect. So that's his review from 1967. And then he revisited it in January of 2001 and said, "Elizabeth, a character in Ingmar Bergman's persona, uses two to answer it. No, don't. She is an actress who one night stopped speaking in the middle of the performance and has been silent ever since. Now a nurse, Alma, has in a fit of rage started to throw a pot of boiling water at her. No, don't," translates as, "I do not want to feel pain. I do not want to be scarred. I do not want to die." She wants to be. She admits she exists. Persona 1966 is a film we return to over the years for the beauty of its images and because we hope to understand its mysteries. It is apparently not a difficult film. Everything that happens is perfectly clear, and even the dream sequences are clear as dreams. But it suggests buried truths, and we despair of finding them. Persona was one of the first movies I reviewed in 1967. I did not think I understood it. A third of a century later, I know most of what I'm ever likely to know about films, and I think I understand that the best approach to Persona is a literal one. It is exactly about what it seems to be about. How this pretentious movie manages to not be pretentious at all is one of the great accomplishments of Persona, says a moviegoer named John Hardy, posting his comments on the Internet Movie Database. Bergman shows us everyday actions and the words of ordinary conversation, and Sven Nykvist's cinematography shows them in haunting images. One of them, of two faces, one frontal and one in profile, has become one of the most famous images of the cinema. Elizabeth, Liv Ullmann, stops speaking in the middle of Electra and will not speak again. A psychiatrist thinks it might help if Elizabeth and nurse Alma, B.B. Anderson, spend the summer at her isolated house. Held in the same box of space and time, the two women somehow merge. Elizabeth says nothing, and Alma talks and talks, confessing her plans and her fears, and eventually in a great and daring monologue, confessing an erotic episode during which she was, for a time, completely happy. The two actresses look somewhat familiar. Bergman emphasizes this similarity in a disturbing shot where he combines half of one face with half of the other. Later he superimposes the two faces like a morph. Anderson told me she and Ullman had no idea Bergman was going to do this, and when she first saw the film she found it disturbing and frightening. Bergman told me, "The human face is the greatest subject of the cinema. Everything is there." Their visual merging suggests a deeper psychic attraction. Elizabeth, the patient, mute and apparently ill, is stronger than Alma, and eventually the nurse feels her soul being overcome by the other woman's strength. There is a moment when her resentment flares and she lashes back. In the sunny courtyard of the cottage, she picks up the pieces of a broken glass and then deliberately leaves a shard where Elizabeth might walk. Elizabeth cuts her foot, but this is essentially a victory for the actress, who has forced the nurse to abandon the discipline of her profession and reveal weakness. Elizabeth looks at Alma, seeming to know the glass shard was not an accident, and at that moment Bergman allows his film to seem to tear and burn. The screen goes blank. Then the film reconstitutes itself. This sequence mirrors the way the film is opened. In both cases, a projector lamp flares to life, and there is a montage from the earliest days of the cinema. Jerky silent skeletons, images of coffins, a hand with a nail being driven into it. The middle break ends with the camera moving in toward an eye, and even into the veins in the eyeball, as if to penetrate the mind. The opening sequence suggests that Persona is starting at the beginning with the birth of cinema. The break in the middle shows it turning back and beginning again. At the end, the film runs out of the camera and the light dies from the lamp and the film is over. Bergman is showing us that he has returned to the first principles. In the beginning there was light. Toward the end there is a shot of the camera crew itself, with the camera mounted on a crane and Nyqvist and Bergman tending it. This shot implicates the makers in the work. There they are, it is theirs, they cannot separate themselves from it. Early in the film, Elizabeth watches images from Vietnam on the TV news, including a Buddhist monk burning himself. Later there are photographs from the Warsaw ghetto of Jews being rounded up. The film lingers on the face of a small boy. Have the horrors of the world caused Elizabeth to stop speaking? The film does not say, but obviously they are implicated. For Alma, the horrors are closer to home. She doubts the validity of her relationship with the man she plans to marry. She doubts her abilities as a nurse. She doubts she has the strength to stand up to Elizabeth. But Elizabeth has private torments too, and Bergman expresses them in a sequence so simple and yet so bold we're astonished by its audacity. First, there is a dream sequence. If it is a dream, opinions differ, in which Elizabeth enters the room of Alma in the middle of the night. In a Swedish summer night is finger drawn by twilight between one day and the next, and the soft pale light floods the room. The two women look at one another like images in a mirror. They turn and face us, one brushing back the other's hair. A man's voice calls, Elizabeth? It is her husband, Mr. Vogler. I don't know how you pronounce that. They're outside. He caresses Alma's face and calls her Elizabeth. No, she says, she is not Elizabeth. Elizabeth takes Alma's hand and uses it to caress her husband's face. Inside later, Alma delivers a long monologue about Elizabeth's child. The child is born deformed, and Elizabeth left it with relatives so she can return to the theatre. The story is unbearably painful. It's told with the camera on Elizabeth, and it's told again word for word with the camera on Alma. I believe this is not simply Bergman trying it both ways, as has been suggested, but literally both women telling the same story. Through Alma when it is Elizabeth's turn, since Elizabeth does not speak. It shows their beings are in union. The other monologue in the movie is more famous, Alma's story of sex on the beach involving herself, her girlfriend and two boys. The imagery of this monologue is so powerful that I've heard people describe the scene as if they actually saw it in the film. In all three monologues, Bergman is showing how ideas create images and reality. The most real objective experiences in the film are the cut foot and the threat of boiling water, which by breaking the film show how everything else is made of thought or art. The most real experience Alma has ever had is her orgasm on the beach. Elizabeth's pain and Alma's ecstasy were able to break through the reveries of their lives. Most of what we think of as ourselves is not direct experience of the world, but a mental broadcast made of ideas, memories, media input, other people, jobs, roles, duties, lusts, hopes, fears. Elizabeth chooses to be who she is. Alma is not strong enough to choose not to be Elizabeth. The key is in the title, persona, singular. What an incredible review. Now I know that was pretty long, but oh, we've got a helicopter. That's pretty fucking loud. Now what a review. Now contrast that with what I read on Letterboxd. Now tell me something's not been lost in film criticism. We've got 4 reviews, the most popular ones, back to back, and they're all aiming to be humorous and quippy. A clear example of what I was discussing last week. And interestingly, Christopher Nolan spoke about that this week, that the amateur critic and their kind of apparent intellectualism because they can spot tropes or the mechanics of a film. And he says that people like think, oh, because I can spot a structure, that means I'm above the film and it's not working. But he does add a little caveat to that, in that he says, if a film's affecting you, then it almost doesn't matter what the mechanics of the plot are. And I think of an example of this that will explain it a little bit better. So if you think of Top Gun Maverick, now so much of that film we're familiar with what it is it's trying to do. And it even builds towards a moment that essentially rips off the original Star Wars, where Han Solo comes back at the 11th hour to help the heroes who are about to be shot down by enemy fighters. Now, in the moment, we've got a bike. Now, in the moment, I'm not aware of the mechanics of the plot. I'm not thinking about the structure or what might happen next, because the filmmaking is so good, so tense, that I give into the film and I forget about the mechanics of the plot. But when you talk about amateur criticism, like look at the difference between what Ebert is able to say about a film versus what the top 4 reviews on Letterboxd are able to say about a film. Now, I also went to, while I was, oh, it's starting to rain. No, surely not. It's starting to rain. I went to, what's the shop called? I just went to Foyles before, the bookshop, and I went and had a look and see if there was any books that took my fancy. And while I was in there, I saw that they had Persona and Shame by Ingmar Bergman. And this book has basically pulled together the 2 scripts for those films. And I say scripts because Bergman doesn't see them as scripts. And I'm just going to quickly read, I say quickly, I'm going to read from the opening pages of this book. So, first of all, there is something that Bergman wrote for the presentation of the Erasmus Prize in Amsterdam, 1965. So this is 1 year before he went on to make Persona. So I just bought this book, by the way, I didn't steal it. So he says, I'll get my words out. Artistic creativity has always manifested itself in me as a sort of hunger. I have observed this need in myself with some gratification, but I have never in all my conscious life asked why this hunger should arise and demand to be satisfied. In the last few years, as it has begun to ease off and been transformed into something else, I have begun to feel it important to try to establish the reason for my artistic activity. I remember from very early childhood a need to show what I had achieved, progress in drawing, the ability to bounce a ball against a wall, my first strokes in the water. I remember feeling a great need to attract the attention of the grown-ups to these manifestations of my presence in the physical world. I never, it seemed to me, excited enough interest in my fellow human beings. And so, when reality no longer sufficed, I began to make things up, regaling my contemporaries with tremendous stories of my secret exploits. These were embarrassing lies, which inevitably founded on the skepticism of the world around me. In the end, I withdrew from fellowship and kept my dreams to myself. A contact-seeking child, beset by fantasies, I was quickly transformed into a hurt, cunning, and suspicious daydreamer. But a daydreamer is not an artist, other than in his dreams. The need to get people to listen, to correspond, to live in the warmth of a fellowship remained. It became stronger and stronger as the prison walls of loneliness closed around me. It was fairly obvious that the cinema should be my chosen means of expression. I made myself understand in a language that bypassed words, which I lacked, music, which I never mastered, and painting, which left me unmoved. Suddenly I had the possibility of corresponding with the world around me in a language that is literally spoken from soul to soul, in terms that avoid control by the intellect in a manner almost voluptuous. I threw myself into my medium with all the dammed up hunger of my childhood, and for 20 years in a sort of rage. I've communicated dreams, sensual experiences, fantasies, outbursts of madness, neuroses, the convulsions of faith, and downright lies. My hunger has been continuously renewed. Money, fame, and success have been the astonishing but basically unimportant consequences of my advance. By this, I do not wish to discount whatever I may have achieved. I believe it has had, and perhaps still has, its importance. What is so comforting to me is that I can see what has passed in a new and less romantic light. Art as self-satisfaction can have its importance, particularly to the artist himself. Today the situation is less complicated, less interesting, and above all less glamorous. Now, to be completely honest, I regard art, and not only the art of cinema, as lacking importance. Literature, painting, music, the cinema, the theatre beget and give birth to themselves. New mutations and combinations emerge and are destroyed. Seen from the outside, the movement possesses a nervous vitality, the magnificent zeal of artists to project for themselves and an increasingly distracted public pictures of a world that no longer ask what they think or believe. On a few preserves, artists are punished. Art is regarded as dangerous and worth stifling or steering. By and large, however, art is free, shameless, irresponsible. And as I said, the movement is intense, almost feverish. It resembles, it seems to me, a snakeskin full of ants. The snake itself is long since dead, eaten out from within, deprived of its poison, but the skin moves, filled with busy life. If I now observe that I happen to be one of these ants, then I must ask myself whether there is any reason to pursue the activity further. The answer is yes. Even though I regard the theatre as an old and well-beloved courtesan who has seen better days, even though I, and many with me, find westerns more stimulating than Antonioni or Bergman, even though the new music gives us feelings of suffocation from the mathematical thinning out of the air, even though painting and sculpture have been sterilised and waste away in paralysing freedom, even though literature has been transformed into a mere cairn of words with no message and no danger, there are poets who never write because they shape their lives as poems, actors who never perform but who act out their lives as high drama. There are painters who never paint because they close their eyes and conjure up the most superb works of art on the back of their eyelids. There are filmmakers who live their films and would never abuse their gift by materialising them in reality. In the same way, I believe that people today can reject the theatre since they live in the midst of a drama which is constantly exploding in local tragedy. They need no music since their hearing is bombarded every minute by great hurricanes of sound in which the pain barrier is both reached and surpassed. They need no poetry since the New World philosophy has transformed them into creatures of function, bound to interesting but poetically unusable problems of metabolism. Man, as I experience myself and the world around me, has set himself free, fearfully, breathtakingly free. Religion and art are kept alive for sentimental reasons, as a conventional courtesy to the past, or in benevolent concern for increasingly nervous citizens of leisure. I am still declaring my subjective view. I hope and am convinced that others have a more balanced and allegedly objective view. If now I take all these unfortunate factors into consideration and assert that in spite of everything I wish to continue making art, it is for one very simple reason. I will disregard any purely material considerations. The reason is curiosity. An unbounded, never satisfied, continuously renewed, unbearable curiosity, which drives me forward, never leaves me in peace, and completely replaces my past hunger for fellowship. I feel like a prisoner who has served a long sentence and suddenly tumbled out into the booming, howling, snorting world outside. I'm seized by an intractable curiosity. I know, I observe, I have my eyes with me. Everything is unreal, fantastic, frightening, or ridiculous. I capture a flying particle of dust. Perhaps it's a film, and of what importance will that be? None whatsoever. But I myself find it interesting, so it's a film. I resolve with the objects I have captured for myself, and am cheerfully and melancholically occupied. I elbow my way in with the other ants. We do a colossal job. The snakeskin moves. This, and this only, is my truth. I don't ask that it should be true for anyone else, and as for comfort for eternity, it is naturally on the slim side. As a basis for artistic activity, during the next few years it is entirely adequate, at least for me. To be an artist for one's own sake is not always very agreeable, but it has one outstanding advantage. The artist is on an equal footing with every other creature who also exists solely for its own sake. Taken together, we're probably a fairly large brotherhood who exist in this way in a selfish fellowship on the warm, dirty earth under a cold, empty sky. Wow. I guess people might say Bergman's egocentric. Not comparing myself to Bergman before anyone starts fucking going on with themselves. Okay, so then before I've got the book in my hand, before the script for Persona, which I'm not going to read, there's a little paragraph that's been written, and it says, I have not written a film script in the normal sense. What I've written seems more like the melody line of a piece of music, which I hope with the help of my colleagues to be able to orchestrate during production. On many points I am uncertain, and at one point at least I know nothing at all. I discovered that the subject I had chosen was very large, and that what I wrote or included in the final film, brackets, horrid thought, was bound to be entirely arbitrary. I therefore invite the imagination of the reader or spectator to dispose freely of the material that I have made available. Okay, and with that, I'm now gonna play the Q&A with Cate Blanchett, Nina Hoss, and Benedict Andrews. Enjoy.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for coming out tonight. I'd like to introduce you. Well, I'd like to give you this retrospective introduction to Persona, this incredible film which we've all just experienced. yet again. And of course, it's marvelous to see it shown in this delectable 35mm print. And on that note, I should, as a sidebar, offer my thanks to BFI fellow Cate Blanchett for making sure that that happened, and has in fact happened twice this evening. But it's not simply that this is a great occasion in and of itself, but it is functioning as a kind of curtain raiser or contextualizer for a theatrical event that's taking place just over the road at the National Theatre in a few short weeks. And I'm talking about the new play by Benedict Andrews, Electra, Persona, which is an extraordinary film by all accounts. A play by all accounts, I haven't yet seen it, which effectively recreates the action of Electra in the first half, the action of Persona in the second half, but hinges them together in a way which a colleague of mine on The Guardian says is a stunning coup de théâtre. And if you want to know what that coup de théâtre is, you're going to have to go online and book a ticket for it like everyone else. So that is the context for this. It's a theatrical event which people I know in the theatre world are saying is the biggest thing since Laurence Olivier presented his double bill of Oedipus and Mr. Puff in the Critic. It's certainly something that I'm madly looking forward to. And so, without any further ado on my part, I want to welcome onto the stage the director, Laurence Andrews, and the two stars, Nina Hoss and Cate Blanchett.
What I think you've just watched, like, one of the sacred objects of cinema that one, approaches at peril. And I kind of always been fascinated by this Bergman being something of a North Star for me, in that he was a great man of the theatre for the whole time he was making these astonishing movies.
Yeah.
And in fact, while he made this, was still running the equivalent of the National Theatre, the Dramaten in Stockholm. He was still running that. Quit in 1966, the same year that this was released. But I was always fascinated by why he, as a person grappling on this hinge or intersection of theatre and cinema, who produced this crystalline, enigmatic masterpiece that kind of still stands as one of the highest achievements of the art form and one of the highest achievements of modernist cinema, and taught us so much about the possibilities of what cinema could be, what acting is, what the face means in close-up. Why did he choose to bury these two frames, or contain these two frames at either end of the movie, where you see Liv Ullmann in the makeup of Electra, the moment where she stops speaking, and then when she seems to return to life at the end after leaving the island, we see a flash of her as Electra again. Why did he choose to put this particular role from the dawn of theatre, from the birth of theatre, from 2,500 years ago? Why did he bury that, or take that as the starting point for his actress's crisis? So as a person who lives inside the theatre and who is working with actors and actresses to unpack the inner lives of characters and the inner lives of stories, of course this is also fascinating in a very different way from something like the Cassavetes Opening Night is, but these great stories that are about the crisis of an actress and a breakdown of an actress. But in the Bergman, it invites us so deeply and so mysteriously, and in a way that you can never solve, into the interior life of these two women, and these women who transfer their identities. So I was very interested in what would the collision of these two pieces be. In simple terms, I felt it's difficult to stage Persona in a way on its own, because it's so singular and such a strange atmosphere. It's like another planet, it's like a kind of vacuum. And the idea that it would have this counter energy, this feral, muscular violence of the Greek drama in format. And then we've all worked together in different ways. Cate and I think this is our fourth time working together. Nina and I had recently done the Cherry Orchard. We all kind of, I think, wanted to work together again separately. And I'll let you guys speak about this, but Cate and Nina, I knew were dear friends, and we were talking about maybe doing something together, and then this idea came that I think can only happen, we'll come to our experiment a bit in a minute, but I think can only happen with deep, 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 deep trust, and with a deep, deep bond. And so I think the idea was then for us, beyond my fascination with the kind of collision of these two pieces, the idea is born out of friendship, and the idea is born out of our delights in being in rehearsal rooms together, the things we bring out from each other in rehearsal rooms, the way that we all push each other and the text in rehearsal rooms, and the way that we share the idea of a rehearsal room being a search and an experiment. And yeah, I think it then grew from that friendship and shared fascination, and the idea of the doubling, which we'll come to, came from that very moment. It wasn't an idea of like either Cate or Nina should be Electra, Elizabeth. You would cast it very differently. You would cast an older Clytemnestra, arguably you'd cast a younger Alma. The idea that in this piece about doubling and mirroring, the idea that they should become each other, and literally that idea is embedded into our production with them playing both the roles and swapping the roles nightly, that's built into the muscles and the fabric of the production, and every single moment of our work together, it's built in there. It's not something that you can put on afterwards. Every single decision we make in the room comes from the merging of the faces that you see right there. Comes from this movie as a kind of mise en abîme that draws you into the two mirrors held against each other, forever reflecting each other.
It came down to your son, Roman. We spent time together, and all of a sudden her son said, "Well, I think you quite alike. You look like sisters." And we were both, and then Cate said, "Sweet person." I don't know where it came from, and I was like, "Yes, let's do it." And here we are with Electra.
Because I was saying that just simply each 25% quadrant of what you're doing is challenging enough, basically. If all you wanted to do was Electra, if all you wanted to do was a new theatrical version of Persona, and if all you want to do is keep the casting the same, that would be hard enough. Or what you're doing is quadrupling or further than that. And I'm not being entirely facetious when I say that. How do you protect your mental health when you're doing this? Because it is really...
I had a proper meltdown today.
1 week left in the room.
Because the idea of a breakdown, I mean, I'm not trying to spread alarm and despondency, but...
We're fine.
Yeah.
We're okay. No, but I think what Benno says is true. I mean, we did turn to one another about 2 o'clock this afternoon and said, I don't think I can be doing this with anyone else but you, because
There's 2 o'clock every afternoon.
Yeah, we don't let you hear saying it. But I think in a way, I don't think it's a coincidence that Liv and Bibi Anderson were very close friends, and Liv Bibi had been going out with Bergman, and during this film, Liv started going out with Bergman. I think a lot went on in that island. Not that that's going on now. but I think I sort of entered, I think, in the second week of the rehearsal, in the same way that there is a profound merging between the women, and such a radical moment of cinema when the monologue about the interiority of Elizabeth's character gets reversed, and the same text gets said again. It's a doubling of text, it's a doubling of time, it's a doubling of character and experience. I think I've sort of come into this not thinking of the characters as being characters in a conventional sense, and in fact, Nina and I are carving out 4 quadrants of the same spirit in a way. So there's not, I'm going to sound a little bit like Andy Serkis with motion capture, but we're sort of co-authoring each role. It's not like, it's like, oh, that's really fascinating. When you do that, that means that I could do this, and then when I do it, maybe, so it's different, but it's constantly expanding through what you're receiving from the other actor. I remember when Phil Hoffman and John C. Reilly did True West, which is a much straighter narrative than what we're dealing with. And they said that at first it felt like a trick, but then as they moved on through it, they were almost able to anticipate what the other person had done, and the other person knew what was coming, and then it would be subverted. So it then became part of the fabric of the evening. And so very quickly, I can't imagine, even though it is terrifying, and who knows when it will be ready. You could be watching all ambulance chases previews, but I mean that's what previews are for, right? But it feels like it's merging into something that I certainly never experienced before.
And it requires extraordinary generosity, I think,
Doesn't it?
from everybody in the room. But from you two, really, to do that, like playing as you said, even one of these roles, playing Electra, you're usually there fighting for your turf constantly versus Clytemnestra. And maybe the brilliance of there's both the Aeschylus version and Sophocles version is it allows our sympathies to move between these kind of warring mother and daughter, and to sort of ask to see both sides. And they literally do. They have to swap skins in that. And so these ideas, I guess, that in this of the more seemingly naive and good nurse who perceives her role to heal people and to take care of them, and to that when that comes in crisis with and who believes things are stable, who believes her role is stable, comes into contact with the person who is by nature mercurial and whose by nature is to go into crisis, to go into things where things start to break apart, but to wear multiple selves all of the time. Their meeting brings out something extraordinary in both of them. And interestingly enough, I think, when we rewatched the movie several weeks back in the dawn of the rehearsal period, and it struck me in the end how the movie is almost like a Shakespearean comedy, where when you go into the woods, in this case the island, maybe, that she does return to society at the end. The woman who is in that hospital bed at the beginning goes through this dream, this merging of selves, this whole kind of breaking apart with Alma, and on the other side of it, does return to her son in the case of the movie, and her daughter in the case of, in our case. She does return to that. She does return to the stage. She does return to cinema. That's up to us to say, has she just papered over the wound, or has she actually generally gone into the wound? But I feel there is a kind of, without diminishing any of the movie's mysteries, there's almost a kind of healing on the other side of it. It's left reverberating and it's left ambivalent, but there's almost a kind of healing. And that's very interesting for us with all of the violence and grief inside the house of Atreus. And the moment where Bibi Anderson's face burns out after she's put the glass there, so after she's betrayed her role, albeit in a kind of experiment, she betrays her role as nurse, and she hurts her patient with the glass, and she's watching that, like she's watching the actress, and her face burns out. And I always thought that's the core, that's the center of this movie, is this burnt out face and this void, and at the center of Electra is a scream, is this scream of pain and this howl of this woman who can't let go of the grief for her father, who can't let go of the idea of that her brother might be left and gone, and who's chosen the way that Elizabeth chooses to live inside her silence and to cage herself in her silence, to weaponize her silence. She's doing all of those things with her grief in Electra, the way, and everyone's trying to bring her out of it as well, or to go against it. And so you have these two, we often talk about it like two batteries, a positive and a negative, both in the roles but in the two plays, and we're setting these two things echoing off each other all the time and reverberating off each other like a big echo chamber.
I wanted to ask Nina actually about Clytemnestra, and how the role, what I find fascinating is the role of Clytemnestra, the persona, if I use that term, of Clytemnestra is illuminated by Alma, is in a way humanized. If you bring the two into alignment, how do you negotiate the two in a way? Because Clytemnestra I always found a fascinating figure, because she's almost, until she comes on, she's almost like the Wicked Witch of the West. And then she says, wait, my daughter Iphigenia was killed by this guy. I'm allowed to have revenge as well. I have the same rights as you. So she comes on, and it's more complicated than you think. Mm-hmm. And then within this kind of this mirror stage that you fascinatingly set up, you have Alma on the other side, who is a figure who is, I think, at the center of one of the great high concept premises in modern cinema. Somebody who's in charge of the talking cure, supposedly getting her patient to talk. The patient won't talk, so she ends up talking. It could be a movie by Woody Allen. It's such a fantastically funny, high concept. And it brings out her vulnerability in the most amazing way, sensational way. Sensational, poignant, melancholy, erotic. All those things which for me have a new perspective because of the relationship for me. And I haven't even seen this play yet. With Clytemnestra. And I want to know how did you feel your way into that, basically? How did you feel your way into Alma?
I've asked myself at the beginning, I know I asked that question, like when Alma and Clytemnestra are one. If you play the role of Clytemnestra and you start the evening with that, you end up with Alma, your persona. And they seem to be like two opposites. But the more you work on them, the more, you see, we call it perforations. There are always these perforations where there is a little Alma in Clytemnestra. There is a little Elizabeth in Electra, a little Electra in Elizabeth. There's even a little Electra in Alma. You know, it's all of a sudden you think about, who are we? There's a moment in Persona where Alma asks Elizabeth, who are you? Who are you? You know, where do you put this? Are you just a role? Are you multiple characters, multiple personas? And that's basically, I think all of these characters somewhat start to merge and inform each other. And maybe every night there will be another little jewel we can find, you know. But they seem to be the opposite, Clytemnestra and Alma. But there is a lot of vulnerability in Clytemnestra. And she also likes to talk. She's not afraid to talk. So there is, maybe because you know you're doing Alma, you look for something in Clytemnestra that you maybe wouldn't necessarily be looking for if you would only do the play Electra.
Right.
I'm not sure about that, but it could be. So there are certain things, I think Alma would love sometimes to have the means of Clytemnestra to put on a mask and to just function and to be witty and to, you know, and then what if that mask slips and what's really behind it, you know? So it's basically, who are we all? You know, we're so many. What did you send us a quote the other day? Like, it's all deeply human, and we're so many things at the end of the day, all of us. Do you live the life that you wanted to live? Do you know, is your life that you're leading fulfilling, or did you have a little desire here in the corner and you never go there? And so it's all these things. You find them with Clytemnestra, you find them with Alma, with Electra, and with Elizabeth. So.
Because there's a lot of masking and unmasking.
Yeah.
We were talking today too about persona being a mask, you know, the word persona, but that also the ancient Greek word for actor was comes from hypocrite, to reveal or to examine under a mask some form of truth that's often an uncomfortable truth. And of course, it didn't have any pejorative meaning at all then, but Clytemnestra wears as many masks as other people do. Even Electra does. She wears the mask of grief. And who is she without that mask of grief? And Clytemnestra's got her own grief. So there's a bit of a grief off between the two women, you know, and that has been caused by men. And of course, in this one here, it's interesting, the doctor figure, as in a lot of Bergman's films, the doctors are often women. Yeah. And the men are quite shadowy figures, and in fact, when the husband comes in, he's in sunglasses. We even thought, oh, is he a Tiresias sort of figure? But so there's a lot of masking and unmasking, to sort of layers and layers to reveal who one actually is, and is that even the point? You know, I mean, Bergman goes as far as trying to get to what's behind the film. Like, how far can I go to degrade it? And there was this amazing quote that he was saying about, you know, what can you do to film? that he said, well, you can change the colour of the lens, you can change the angle, you can change the... But in the end, however you develop it, it's still film. The only thing you can do to stop it being a film is to put it in a box and put it in the dark under your bed and never look at it again. But even then, you know it's there. And I think that's the thing is that
Even though he burns it, it's running through his
here we all are watching on a new restored 35mm print. Thank you, BFI. But it's but I think it's really interesting that in terms of the conversation between the two women, is that Elizabeth has decided the most radical form of truth, perhaps, is to be silent. That, you know, saying somebody else's words, shouting in the dark, as we say, you know, the act of being an actor. What truth is it actually revealing to people? What is the exchange between actor and audience?
I've always found that was one of the most subversive and interesting things about Persona, is that she listens to somebody acting on the radio and bursts out laughing at her.
Yeah.
Bloody ridiculous acting sound.
Yeah.
I think that's incredibly subversive, daring thing to do.
You can
She
hear
becomes
the
Alma's
concept.
audience.
Yeah.
Alma starts performing for her.
Yeah, she
the
starts
non-actor starts
and has-
playing for her.
Yes, and she retreats into that silence, and it's like a weaponized silence. It couldn't be more different. Electra has these three colossal, highly verbalized iterations, emotional iterations to the audience. One, extreme grief, which turns into extreme joy when you realise that Orestes is alive, and then extreme
Particularly
rage.
when you play Orestes.
When I played Orestes, I should say, ladies and gentlemen, when I was 16 years old, I played Orestes at school.
Seminal production.
Seminal production. Nobody's heard of it? No. But I sadly was brought to the age of a kind of mini nervous breakdown, along with two other 16-year-olds in the class. Nowadays, 16-year-olds are not allowed to play, for obvious reasons. It's near use. But I think those three colossal events are highly verbalized. They're passionately verbalized. And then, well, Elizabeth retreats into silence, into the most enigmatic and not exactly weaponized, but certainly motivated silence.
But I think it sort of reveals that thing about, in the absence of meaning, we still seek it. Like we're always, even in the most abstract piece of cinema or abstract novel or a work of art, we still, as human beings, are trying to form what the narrative architecture is. We seek meaning, and I think it's really been really interesting doing the scenes, if you can call them that Benno has written. That the character is almost reading a form of communication into to Elizabeth's absence of dialogue.
And I guess in this
absence
too,
of text.
even though she chooses to be silence and weaponize the silence, the close-up of the camera, every quiver of the mouth, every little thing, Alma is reading. I don't know why I keep pointing to you as Alma. Alma is the Almas and the Elizabeths, but she's interpreting every single thing as if it was spoken. But this idea of them, Peter, which you talk about these language acts in the Greeks, I think is also a very interesting thing as this theatre maker choosing to put Electra there. Persona for mask, also coming from personare, to sound out through the mask, and that the idea of the theatre, for all, you know, for as silent as Beckett might make aspects of it or whatever, that's also about a degrading of language, because in the end, theatre is this spoken act. Theatre, we're left words in plays, and we go out nightly and we speak words, and they make explosions in the audience's imagination. And if any act of compassion or catharsis happens, it's through the words passing between us. And cinema, we leave behind images. Films are arguably, we remember this for the images much more than what is said. So here's this person between these two forms who chooses to make his actress go silent, forcing himself as a filmmaker, burying the classical play underneath it in an act of silence, burying the theatre of him in order to open up what is radical about cinema, which is the human face and the landscape of the human face. And what better way to study that by isolating two actresses he loved and was fascinated by on his island, and to study this communication and non-communication between them. And it leaves us with this great enigma.
It's very enigmatic, and every time I sort of forget what Persona is about, I see images like that and say, oh my God, I have a new impression of it in my mind, that they must be very close, they must be lovers. And you realise, no, that's not what Persona is. There's a lot of cruelty, almost sadism. I wanted to bring up, I know this sounds an absurd thing to do, but the problem, in the Sherlock Holmesian sense, of the open envelope Elizabeth gives Alma a letter, and it's left open. Now, what do you guys think? Did she? I mean, I thought every time I see that, that's an obvious ploy. Elizabeth wants Alma to read it, and once you've absorbed that, you think, what an extraordinary, cruel, and sadistic thing to do.
Yeah,
Alma has opened her heart in the most extraordinary way, and has Elizabeth. Is that all she's got to say? I mean, I have another theory, which I won't put in. What do you think? Is there a strain? Does Bergman give us a glimpse of something very dark and mean-spirited and sadistic?
I think you could read it that way, but I find it really fascinating in human beings. The idea of ambiguity, when you smash up against two competing, contradictory states, and it produces a strange dissonance. And I think we are constantly in a state of knowing and not knowing simultaneously, wanting to hide and wanting to be revealed simultaneously. I think that's part of being alive, and I think we often pretend and don't look at that shadow part of ourselves and how it continually coexists, actually in the same moment. That you can want it to be opened and you can want it to be sealed at the same time. So you can sort of forget to seal it.
Sort of Schrodinger's cat.
And like the dream ciphers of Lynch, who takes so many leads from this.
Right.
It's radically ambivalent at every single moment, like our own dreams are too. It is both those things simultaneously, because you can also read the letter where she says, I'm starting to notice things again, I'm starting to hear nature, I'm starting to be in myself, as a letter of healing to her doctor, who genuinely wants her to be better. She's also confessing that she says, this person who sent me, I'm quite curious about her as an actress, I'm starting to study her. And that is the horror to Alma, that she was betrayed, that she was used, but maybe the actress at that point was just confessing, this is really interesting. She wasn't aware of the power gap. And I like what you said about thinking they're sometimes lovers, and yet they're also cruel. Because that's lovers too, right? Lovers well. But I think for me, when we rewatch the film, I walked away from it going, it's a tender movie. You can remember it sometimes as this almost glacial, poetic, dreamlike thing, but it's incredibly tender. And there's a deep care for each other, which is why it hurts when she's betrayed and why the violence is there. They open up a lot in each other like lovers, and I think that intimacy and that tenderness is actually why the movie, for all its stylistic genius and all its startling images, I think it's also why the history stays with us, is that tenderness and that intimacy. And in the room, we're not trying to remake the movie. We work with a camera at certain points and a live camera and all of that and the face, but we're never trying to remake the movie. Why would you? We're like, how do you drill into what's going on between these two women in the special kind of empty, reflective, rhetorical space that theatre offers, where there aren't cuts, where everything's happening in the real time. Everything's happening in the same room as the audience, with nowhere to hide. And a lot of the beauty of the movie, like in Dreams, is the sudden cut from one thing to another, and the spaces between those. So I think that's also very interesting when we translate it every day. It's like, how does theatre, his original art form, meet his masterpiece?
But also going back to the letter, I
Yes.
feel there's also something to think about why Alma picks the letter up. You know, so there's always an ambiguity. With Elizabeth, it maybe is, firstly, she gets interrupted while closing the letter, as far as I remember. And she gives it, you can post it, you're going to close it.
Yes.
You won't read it. And then you have like an almost Hitchcock kind of look on Alma in the car. Like, oh my God, she's tempted. And Elizabeth might go, let's see what happens. You know, she's not saying, it's an act of creativity in a way. Let's move this story forward. You know? And she does. She goes like, I'm going to read this, and then it's the biggest switch in the story. Because now Alma comes out. She wants something, and then the merge happens, and it's vampire, and whatever it is.
It is, no, you're right. I think it's vampiric.
So it's not just, nothing is simple. You know? And that to me is also the world we live in. It's a lot of ambiguity, and everyone who denies that, I I don't know, doesn't see what life is. You know, it's a lot of stuff is going on at the same time.
I always see when Alma's about to injure her very seriously with a piece of broken glass. It's a very shocking,
exactly.
shocking
In a
thing
way,
to
it
do.
also
And yet I
puts
watch the
the-
movie and
yeah.
never think that they're anything other than close and loving people.
Yeah.
I think, how can that be? That glass thing which Michael Haneke borrowed for piano teachers, I remember. He kind of borrowed that whole idea. In that it's shocking, it's horrible, and yet it's intimate, almost the sort of thing a child would want to do, not a grown-up. And I think that Elizabeth has something in her book. Graham Greene said, the splinter of ice in your heart, what a real artist has, is a strained coldness. It doesn't counteract your
Why are you looking at me?
I want you to bring
Yes.
but I think it doesn't necessarily counteract your need for compassion, or your capacity for compassion. Are we running? All right, we're running a bit low on time, ladies and gentlemen. But I think we've got time for. Are we out of time? Oh, we're over time. Oh, well, that's an awful ball because I thought we were just getting.
Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.